Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Georgia Chamber President and CEO, Chris Clark.
Well, good morning. Senator Gooch, thanks for coming. We appreciate you making it today. So we had the singing, we had the praying, and now I'm going to preach for a minute. Is everybody good with that? Figured you're used to it. So for those of you that are unfamiliar with the Georgia Chamber, thank you for joining us today to this annual event, and thank you to David Bradley and the incredible folks in Athens for hosting us for the first time. We're so blessed to be here. You know, part of our responsibility at the Georgia Chamber is to help our members mitigate risk, look into the future, and take advantage of opportunities. It's what our team at the Chamber wakes up every day. We do it through events like this, through our advocacy, through our policy development, and we have a little formula that we've used for the last almost 15 years. It's to spend time at events, one-on-one meetings, surveys, polling, to listen to our members, what your needs are, what you see is coming in the future, to do the data research, to look into those issues, take them to our committees, and then develop policies with many of the legislators and elected leaders in this room so that Georgia can continue, Governor, be the best place to do business, the best place to live, work, play, and pray. Now, part of that responsibility is to continue to look into the future. What's going to happen 5 years from now, 10 years from now? That's a big part of our responsibility. But I thought it would be interesting today to share with you what our members are telling us that they see as threats and risk and potential opportunities around the world today, as a way maybe to set up the discussions that we're going to have with our elected leaders. So I want to walk you around for a few minutes and touch on some of the issues that our members are telling us that is keeping them up at night, if you will. Let's start globally. Consistently now, we're hearing from our members about their concerns, primarily from a global standpoint, from the rise of the Chinese government and their efforts. Now, within that, I believe there are opportunities. But there are concerns out there. We know, for example, that the Chinese government is purchasing farmland in Georgia. They're buying American brands. They're investing around the world in their own supply chain to sell their goods and products and compete with Georgia and American companies. To counter that, we need, and we did support the Federal Infrastructure Act, but we need to make sure that here in Georgia, we're continuing to invest in freight and logistics and supply chains so our Georgia companies can compete at the national level by moving their goods and products around the world and in and out of our ports. We also need to make sure that we have a strong and robustly funded military. We saw just what happened off of Alaska coast in the last 48 hours. The military bases in Georgia are critical for the nation's defense, and to the men and women from Congress that are with us today, thank you for your investments, and I think we'll talk about that today. We also hear consistently from our members their concerns on the rise of cybersecurity attacks and issues primarily from foreign agents. And then we know there's a lot of work to be done at the federal level, but we have to be vigilant here in Georgia as well. So a lot of issues globally that our businesses are dealing with. There's some in the evolving technology field, and one of those I think ties back to the global issue, and that's the rise of artificial intelligence. Now, China has made it a point for the last 20 years to try to lead in this effort. That's why it's vitally important that we have a robust federal R&D tax credit and a very robust Georgia R&D tax credit so that our companies can continue to develop the next generation of AI or whatever other technology might come. It's also important that we continue to fund university-led research like is happening right here at the University of Georgia. A lot of that done through our affiliate and our friends at the Georgia Research Alliance. Now, there's opportunities there, and there's another great opportunity in evolving technologies around the mobility space. And I want to thank the Department of Economic Development, Governor, you, every legislator in this room, for making us the buckle of the battery belt, right? That's something for us to celebrate. Those are jobs for our children for the next 50 to 60 to 70 to 100 years. But there's one little thing about that effort. All those cars and those flying airplanes that we're going to charge down the road here in Conyers, they all need electricity and power. 3 times more power than we use today in the next 20 years. And that's why on behalf of the business community, I know Pedro mentioned it before, but I want to thank the Public Service Commission, as well as Georgia Utilities, for bringing the first nuclear reactor online in 30 years So make sure that we can fund and fuel the next generation of jobs in Georgia. Thank you, guys. We appreciate you. Now, any of you that have been to any of our events for the last 2 years know that I can't get up in front of a group without talking about the war for talent. Raise your hand if you have openings at your company right now. Okay, the 3 of you that didn't, you're lying. You're just lazy, don't want to raise your hand. I get it. So of all of our research and looking at this issue, there are 3 critical issues that we're facing right now. Number 1 is a lack of participation. Georgia's lost 10% of our eligible workforce in the last 20 years. People just aren't coming back to work. We've also had a preparedness problem. Our young men and women are not prepared to go to college or to graduate. In fact, if you want a statistic to take home today, 40% of U.S. high school students, when they graduate, will never have worked a day in their life. They've never been yelled at, barked at, late for work, covered for somebody, had to work overtime. Guys, all of you worked in high school. You had that experience. I love what Jerry Moorhead is doing at the University of Georgia. Every graduate from UGA has to have real-world experience before they graduate. We need that in every high school student and every college student in Georgia, right? It's right. You got to respond back, or unless you got more chicken, whatever. It's too late. You missed it. It's too late. I'm moving on. The third issue that we've got in workforce is the demographic cliff. Starting this year, we'll have smaller high school classes, smaller college classes, which means smaller numbers of men and women entering the workforce every year for the next 10 years. And then on top of that, 73 million baby boomers will retire by 2030. We will be in a labor shortage for the next 10 years before Generation Alpha start coming into the workforce, which will be the largest generation in history. But unfortunately, they won't be born here. Right? They're primarily overseas. So what do we do about all of this? First of all, requiring real-world experience, looking for incentives to get people back to work, and quite frankly, to our federal friends, we need a national effort to restore the value of work, to tell people there's a value in showing up every day and going to work and not sitting at home. It's a national issue that we've got to deal with. And plus, we've got to change our career pathways, fix immigration. All of those things need to be done in order to have the workforce that we need for the future. Now, this might be surprising to you, particularly from my friends from Congress, but I hear a lot of concerns about federal regulations as we travel the state. And primarily lately, it's been in a couple of areas. Number 1, if you were paying attention last week, several federal agencies announced that within the next month, they were going to issue a slew, as I think is a technical term, of new labor regulations. New workforce regulations on Georgia businesses. We don't know exactly what those are, but we're tracking them, and we're going to work with members of Congress to make sure that they don't inhibit our ability to help our companies grow in this state. And then there are tax issues. We know that the last tax bill spurred innovation and growth in the state of Georgia. A lot of those components are about to expire. If we don't do work soon, to my members of Congress, Georgia's small businesses will pay more in taxes than Georgia large companies. And then we've also got to fix sooner than later, the problem in the tax credit that gives tax credits for electric vehicles to certain companies and not others. The fact is, hardworking Georgians are going to be building those vehicles in Georgia, and they need the same access as those built anywhere else. So, some work to do at the federal level as well, and we'll talk about some of those today. Now, I don't hear this as much from other companies, but I hear it a lot from our chamber partners and economic developers that, Governor, you know this, we're the gold standard, right? We're the best place to do business. And when you're the best, everybody else starts shooting at you. So far this year, 32 other state legislatures have passed aggressive incentives and economic development tools to go recruit new companies to their communities. And 3 states have passed new bills to recruit film production there. And so we've got to continue to make sure that we don't ever rest on our laurels, that we're always focused on the future. And Governor, we appreciate your leadership in that space. And then third is, what do we do here at home? Well, one is that competitiveness piece, making sure we've got a tax policy, economic development tools that are stable and help us grow over the long term. But there are a couple of big issues we have to talk about too. Number 1, we can't continue to be the best place to do business and the number 1 judicial hellhole, right? We can't have criminal elements clogging up our judicial system to make it hard for your mom and dad to get their cases heard, right? We can't have tort taxes that charge Georgians over $4,000 a year, Commissioner, in additional insurance rates, right? Or $100,000 a year for med-mal. And so we have to address that issue just to keep things fair and balanced. And finally, I have a 17-year-old entering his senior year this year. The research says that his generation won't be able to afford a home until they're 45 years old. That's your kids and your grandkids. And so there's work to do, and I appreciate the members of the General Assembly that worked on this issue last year to help us make sure that our young people can live that Georgia and American dream by getting the homes that they need. So that's just a few of the things that we hear from our members, a few of the things that we're working on your behalf. And so what's the secret sauce in Georgia? How does this stuff keep working? How do we figure these tough issues out? It's because the business community works with our elected leaders. And I want to specifically thank Governor Kemp, Lieutenant Governor Jones, Speaker Burns, the members of the General Assembly, our senators, members of Congress who listen to the business community, who seek to work with us, who show up every day, who ask us and listen. And I think we take that for granted. You can applaud any of this. I'm happy with it. I'll take it. Drew and I were talking last night that his peers in other states tell him, you don't know how lucky you got it in Georgia. And it's because of hard work and those kind of partnerships. So please engage with us. That's why the Georgia Chamber's here. We exist for Georgia businesses, for the state, for your employees, for your communities. And we're going to fight on all these issues and work with all of our elected leaders to address these concerns as we move forward. So we appreciate you being with us, and to continue this discussion and talk about those solutions, I want to introduce our first panel today, led by my good friend Kevin Perry, who's president of the Georgia Beverage Association and chair of the Governmental Affairs Council of the Georgia Chamber. Please welcome to the stage Kevin Perry.